stereotype threat and how that relates to our vision of a school that teaches for freedom.
So stereotype threat is that even if we know that these stereotypes are not necessarily true, they still are very impactful in the classroom, right? Like the idea that you are worse at something based on a stereotype actually has real academic effect, right? That's what we're...
It does, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
There's a lot of the stereotype threat, like that the research has shown that when students are presented with an evaluation, that there's more of a risk of a higher impact of stereotype threat because of the stereotypes that they feel that they need to overcome, that they need to address as being false. So it's using up basically like their table is smaller because they're using up a lot of cognitive space worrying about these stereotype threats.
Good analogy.
Joe is, under, influence of the stereotype threat, obviously, because he's fulfilling his own prophecy where he's not doing very well based on these stereotypes. And part of that is probably that teachers just haven't had high expectations of him his whole entire educational career because of these.
Until he got to our school.
Until he got to
our school, we've done how much work to try to limit the stereotype threat that students face, right?
That's a good point.
Part of it is just encouraging mastery learning, right? So using language that doesn't talk about ability, not saying this student is really highly able as compared to this other student, because especially when you have stereotypes about certain races or certain activities that they're not very capable, they're not very able, if you start talking about ability a whole bunch in your classroom, those students are automatically going to turn off because they're going to be I'm not able, so therefore I can't do this activity, right? So you have this huge, their expectancy value is really, really low.
Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
So we could talk about
Show me what you got.
Intrinsic are goals that come from within, usually related to mastery goals.
I'm sorry.
Goals that come from within that are usually related to mastery goals.
So that would be intrinsic?
Yeah. Right, so self-motivated, so there's self-motivation and self-regulation are all part of
my favorite.
The whole setting goals for yourself that you want to complete for yourself.
So extrinsic motivation is
parental standards, teacher pressure from teachers.
Well, so for the intrinsic motivation, we've got self-motivation, self-regulation. Seeing a lot of self here.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. That's
extrinsic motivation is grades, getting the grades. So Bobby Joe thinks that nobody is expecting things out of him.
Because he's just a football player.
Yes.
Yeah. And because he's also an African American.
So I think I think that's an easy one to relate to, for just there aren't, all of his expectations are going to have to be intrinsic, basically. Right, because he doesn't have.
Well, if we want him to apply himself to school, they're going to have to become intrinsic.
Well, but the extrinsic one would be showing him that his grades do matter to us. That I do expect him to do well, even though he is a football player.
Absolutely. So reversing the stereotype threat of both of the things working against him being just a jock and just another African American student in the school who is just another one that everyone expects to not care about their grades. So working against that by expressing that, no, we do care and we expect you to do well.
That's a good point.
They both are necessary in educational practice. You cannot have a class with, especially in today's society, you cannot have a class that does not have any summative assessment.
Absolutely. So they serve different roles.
Do we want to talk about
They don't have to be high stakes.
Because we
Because
definitely
you don't need to be passing classes based on them, but you want to be able to.
But we don't want just any substantive testing. We want non-high stakes substantive testing, right? Because
ideally.
Well, I think the high stakes. If you give somebody a summative assessment, especially Bobby Joe. If you give him a summative assessment and don't tell him that it's got some stakes on it, he's gonna not give two shits.
There are high stakes assessments that he's going to. Well, he's going to have to take them if he wants to go to college. Just because he gets a full ride, because he's like our star quarterback, doesn't mean that he doesn't have to pass his SATs. He's not exempt. He's
no, he has to take them.
Exactly.
But he doesn't have to do super well. He's got to get like a medium score.
But he needs to know that like these summative assessments are important and they will have an impact on his future.
That's a very excellent point.
Anyway.
So go to school. Do your homework.
Good point.
Don't play video games.
He's gonna not give two shits.
That's a good point.
Making good points.
And or that could just
Good
be
point,
it.
guys.
I like where you're going with this.
I like where you're going with this. Good effort, guys.
Dig a little deeper.
You obviously studied hard.
You've been putting a lot of thought into this. Setting personal goals, high self-efficacy. Why is saying that word so hard?
Because you want to make it a soft C every time I see it. I don't know why. Efficacy.
Oh, you've been paying attention in your linguistics class. Stereotype threat, and it pulls up a picture of a woman.
What? How do they know that?
I don't know, but I
How
think that
are
we need to have
computers so
some.
damn smart?
I think we need to have a conversation with Microsoft.
That's how you go back tab.
No, that's what I. Oh, there we go. It didn't work before. I tried that, and it's like nope.
Way to problem solve, everybody.
Anyway.
So go to school. Do your homework.
Good point.
Don't play video games. Starting.
Should we just order sandwiches?
I'm down.
How dare you have a life outside of this program?
Fired.
I guess. That's his reality.
Is your butt falling asleep?
Yes, and I'm trying to be quiet about it.